The Court of Justice of the European Union ruled in October that an employer prohibiting the visible wearing of all religious, philosophical, or spiritual signs at work does not constitute direct discrimination. This and more will be the topic of conversation for today's episode of the Global Atheists. Welcome to the Global Atheists. I have here with me today. Today with us is Phil G, the Skeptic Atheist, Ian from Britain, and Andras from Hungary. Yep, and Phil, you're in Barbados. So, do we need introductions?
Not necessarily.
I mean, it's the first time I'm doing this, so okay. Yeah. Well, what I prepared for this conversation was a little bit of news that came out a few weeks ago that the Court of Justice of the European Union has ruled on a case in Belgium which essentially boils down to that if a company wants to forbid in their internal rules open signs of religion, that's not a discrimination. I think that's a good one to start with, to say that, yes, that's a very European thing. Essentially mean crosses, hijab, presumably there's other stuff, but those are the most important ones. Companies can essentially rule that their staff can't wear that at work. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I believe it's a good thing too, because with that, it covers the company apparently is for any religion at all, or like that. It covers any religion. We're not supposed to have wearing visible signs of their religious, philosophical signs at work, right? So so someone might come and say, "Oh, it's discriminatory. They want to prevent the person from wearing the hijab," but it's not targeting the hijab. It's not targeting the specific religion. It's a general, broad base covering all, which you will expect for a secular society.
Yes.
Society.
Sorry, to make sure rules that rule out one sign in particular, let's say a cross, that would be discrimination, but a general ban is fully okay.
Correct.
Is the idea.
Yeah, because allowing it, if you allow one, then you have to allow for everybody, whatever they claim to be their religious persuasion or religious icon, so let's say, suppose the religion is one where they have to take off their shirt as part of their religious identity. Really, come on, so I think it's a good thing. It's a broad base, as I said, which as long as you're in a secular society, to prevent discrimination or giving one religion the advantage over another or over non-religion. right? You have to keep it broad, general terms to prevent that from happening. Which you don't find in a lot of religious countries. Some religious countries like Barbados that declare that they are secular but very religious. And the government pandering, having prayers, Christian prayers in school.
So just asking a clarifying question here, is this law effectively saying that a company can choose to either ban all religious iconography or no religious iconography, but it can't pick and choose? Is that all it's saying?
Yes.
That doesn't sound particularly controversial. That sounds like it should be the norm, the standard.
Yeah. Not from our point of view, but if you're the one who's not allowed to wear any kind of iconography, any kind of sign of your religious affiliation, then well, you will very likely get upset with it, with that kind of rule. So from your perspective, it's kind of a discrimination.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the answer is it's probably not a discrimination, but it will feel like one to anyone that is actually affected by it.
I mean, the case started rolling, as one would expect, by a woman in Belgium who wasn't allowed by her employer to wear a hijab. She had a very visible public job, and so she wanted to wear the hijab there. Her employer said no, and she started, the law rolling that eventually ended up in the EU Court of Justice.
Mm-hmm.
And for, essentially charging for discrimination. But so, because there was just a ban on all religious iconography, the court says, no, that's not discrimination. I didn't follow, by the way, how it went with her, whether she complied with the ruling or something else. Maybe I should have. But of course, I mean, particularly the hijab is controversial, even in the Netherlands. I know that organizations like the police, of course, ban hijabs. And for a while, that was, for instance, crosses were okay. And so they ruled out crosses as well, and we are now compliant. But it's a controversial subject. And yes, I understand that if you want to wear the hijab, it may well feel, nasty.
Discriminatory.
Yeah.
No, we have to understand something about this. If someone is wearing a hijab, she wears a hijab, that means that it's part of her identity. So it's so deeply it goes so deep down into the everyday level of a person's existence that we have to be more understanding as to how these people feel about this. I'm not saying with that this ban should not be allowed, because a company should be allowed to decide what they allow and what they don't. Try to compare it to school uniforms. If at a certain school pupils are required to wear a uniform, that will basically mean that everything else that they wear, or everything else that it shows any kind of sign of them being different in any way from the others. So those could be signs of or any kind of iconography or any kind of religious signs that they cannot wear openly because they have to put on the uniforms, and that will basically cover every other kind of sign. and I think it has a purpose of doing exactly that. Like whether a child comes from a rich family, comes from and can wear all kinds of expensive clothing, whereas the other cannot. But that kind of difference disappears and vanishes with wearing a uniform. So I do see a parallel here with this as well. So if a company decides that, yes, what you have to wear here is neck and tie, or they can definitely tell their workers what they have to wear. But whether a hijab is something that can be put on as well, along with the other parts of the clothing, could be put up for debate, in my opinion, because you can have a complete, you can be completely dressed up and still wear something on your head. You could potentially wear any kind of hat as well. But usually it's frowned upon, at least, right? If in a certain community you're wearing a hat, it's like not necessarily something that people will like. But are you banned from doing that? A company should definitely be able to decide whether they allow that or not to happen.
I think there's a couple of other analogies that you could consider here, though. One is, if you imagine someone who comes from a family of practitioners of nudism. Because culturally they have a certain way of dressing that is not the norm, and it is a part of their identity. And the question is, should we allow that? And the answer, I think, is pretty clear. No, we definitely don't protect that. So it seems that religion is getting special treatment in some respects there.
Yep.
And the other analogy that I would have, and this one maybe Phil will really sort of resonate with on this one, is should an employer be able to tell us, for example, that we aren't allowed to wear glasses? Because that is not part of our identity, or it is part of our identity, but it's not culturally something that you and I have chosen to do. It's simply something that we've been born with. It's a part of our identity. Look at that, there we go. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, there are other options. We could wear contacts, we could, in my case, I could probably do without, because my prescription is relatively minor. But the point is that actually, are we in a position where an employer can dictate to me that I have to suffer a form of inconvenience, or almost a form of, I have to leave part of my identity behind because of their image? And I think we end up in that confusing area.
But it's more than that, because it's a kind of prosthetic, right? So it's a medical equipment rather than just a habit of wearing something. So a religious something that shows clear signs of a religious affiliation. It's basically a habit. It's a cultural thing. It's not. I think it has a medical issue has to trump a cultural one. So it's it should be.
I don't disagree with you there, but I have the glasses. I also walk with sticks because I've got a partial disability. But the point that I was really making is that is still a core part of my identity. And the argument is that actually, from a religious perspective, a lot of people don't, realistically, they don't have a lot of choice. That's simply the way that they were born, the way that they were educated, indoctrinated, whatever we want to call it. The reality is it's part of their identity, and it's a core part of their identity, and it's not necessarily a part of their identity that they choose to have in the same way that a medical position or a medical problem is not something that any of us have chosen to have.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I would like to add to this is that, well, for instance, Dutch police says hijab is a bad idea simply for a copper on the street, for doing his or her job. Sorry, her job, that will be. And I think that's a bit of, what do you say, that excuse. Rather than a good reason, I suppose that a woman policewoman with a hijab can do a job as well as any other, but it's just that they want to show a uniform, and that makes sense. I mean, police uniforms make sense. You must be able to recognize a police officer.
Yeah.
But that's
part of the police officer's position. So you have to be able to recognize it, but it's not a religious thing. It has a very technical kind of connotation instead of a cultural one. So
yeah.
But does that same sort of principle apply for people who do, say, back office roles? So they aren't public facing at all. They have no interaction with people on the streets. Do they still have the same limitations?
I don't know by heart. I mean,
that's fine. It's
seem to remember that that has been part of the discussion here, but I don't remember at the moment how that ended. So it may well be that women working back office jobs can wear the job.
But I think regardless of that, in a work environment where your focus needs to be on the job that you do, deviating from that or anything that keeps you from doing your job and concentrating on your job, like being provoked in any way, and should not be allowed by the company, because it will decrease the level of efficiency of the work that is being done at the company, right? So imagine that in a very diverse environment where a lot of people belong to different religious communities. Obviously, getting something right in their faces all day long will be considered a provocation.
Yeah.
And I do agree with that not being allowed, because it's why would you want that? Why would you want someone not only with a hijab, but why would you want someone running around with a big cross just hanging from their necks? Why angry anyone else? Why upset anyone else who doesn't belong to that religious community? Or why upset atheists? Or I, as an atheist, I won't have any kind of sign on me that's saying that I'm an atheist, but I can be offended by constantly being bombarded with these signs. And I should not be allowed to be upset.
You made a good point there, Andras, because I realize when you go in, or work in some environment, some people have their radio on, playing religious music, gospel music, and loud enough where you, as an atheist or persons from another religion, don't really want to hear. Not because sometimes it comes over as proselytizing, and many Christians do it as a means of trying to spread their Christian message during work time to people who don't believe.
Yeah.
and is very inconsiderate.
Oh,
And
exactly.
sometimes it's allowed to happen, especially in a very religious country. Well, like Barbados, 70%. Last I heard was 70% claim to be Christian, and but you have, of course, 30% who are not. And how is it? And I realize that the Christians here, because of the privilege that they have had for a very long time, take these things for granted and do that. Now, let's say a Satanist, a person who belongs to Satanic Temple, who don't believe Satan is real, but come and play some music that they will deem satanic. They will keep noise, a lot of noise in the workplace about how they're playing this, and they will keep noise. I've seen this sort of thing happen already, and I find it is that is why for this I think there's a good idea where you cover everyone and saying, look, we have people here of different religions, non-religious, etc. You cannot be imposing or seem to be imposing your religious identity on other people. And then too, I was thinking about security reasons also, because it depends on how the hijab is worn, because somewhere the hijab right across covering their face, and for security reasons that is not appropriate in a workplace, you know.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. And this is why I think what we oh, sorry.
No, I was literally just going to say, I would say that actually one of the duties that we have as responsible humans, not just atheists,
right,
but responsible humans, is to try to do our absolute best not to be offended by what other people choose to do. So if someone decides that they want to wear a cross, if someone wants to wear a hijab, that sort of thing, we should just shrug and say it doesn't affect us. It's not something that we have to deal with. So, although it might cause problems for some people, it won't be for us.
Some people, because of traumatic experience of trauma from religion and so on, it can mentally affect them.
I didn't even think of that, but yeah.
So I think it's responsibility of people to be more humanist in terms of thinking about their fellow human, how these things, especially knowing the trauma religion has caused many people who have come out, it can trigger some really bad memories, especially if that person have had panic attacks or PTSD as a result of their religious trauma. Certain it's I think sometimes persons can be kind of selfish, especially religious
Sometimes
people. Sometimes some religious people. There are some religious people. Few would say that will be more conscious of these things, but there are a lot of religious persons that just don't care, as long as their holy book tells them spread this message. You have to do it. They just don't care. They said, "Oh, your soul is more important." Like some Christians will say, "Your soul is more important than your trauma," or so.
Are you saying that basically out on the street, wearing anything that has the potential to upset people should be allowed as well? Or we're still talking about the work environment.
No, the work environment. I'm not talking about. Because work environment is a very close environment.
Yeah.
Where you're working day in, day out.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a more close environment or closed environment that out on the streets
because
or
on
store going to groceries.
Yeah. On the other hand, yes, because I do believe that out in the street, everyone should be allowed to wear whatever they want to, because if it upsets someone, that's up to them to deal with it. I mean, it's you're not forced to look at that person all day long while you should be doing your job. Because you can turn the other way and you can go away and not look at that person. But this is why I think one of the most important aspects of this is secularism, and secularism is very often confused with atheism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably partly because most secularist people who are pushing for secularism are atheists. But I think it's very considerate. So a secular attitude is a considerate attitude towards all kinds of religions as well.
Yes.
And from a humanistic point of view, I think that is the best approach. Because you live and let live as well at the same time.
And if you look at a lot of the countries who are really secularists, in Europe, you realize that they don't have that many problems in terms of dealing with people. Where the Netherlands, I think Hein, sex workers it is legal. There's no imposition of any religious thing saying they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But and they're very safe. They work very safely. Yeah.
That's the primary goal of all this kind of thing. Work safety in the street, all that.
Yeah. And they have less STDs there because they take. It's like, okay, this is the regular educational thing where you have protection and so on. Whereas now you find in religious countries which try to suppress these things and suppress contraceptives, you end up with high rates of pregnancy, high rates of STDs, etc.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is not the application of good scientifically proven methods that work. They disregard scientifically proven methods, medical methods that work. Right? And thinking that restricting people with severe restrictions is going to help them, and it does not. And there are facts, there are statistics to show that. And then as Andras said, once you find in those even highly secular countries, they don't care whether you're an atheist, whether you're a Christian, whether and so then you gear your country towards everybody has the right to believe what they want to in terms of religion, but they do not have the right to impose on other people in certain situations. If you're in church, like for example here, imposition, I can give a good example of imposition in Christianity. Schools, public schools. First, full assembly is Christian devotions. Farm, they call it farm prayers, Christian devotions. House spurs, they call it house spurs, Christian devotions. And this is almost every day. Disregard for those who don't believe. If there's a they have even went as far as bringing in gospel concert musicians to spread proselytize within a public school and force the children to go to the hall to listen. Right, and then that creates a serious problem, and that's why he talked about being in your face all day, basically, right? Imposing their religion and thing, and then you have to push back. Persecution.
Now, I think pushback is a very important and very powerful tool. And the problem is that it has two sides. So, for example, as we look through European countries, in the last decade, we've seen an increase in the number of non-religious young people. Very significant increase in their numbers. Now that makes the elderly population, or the side of the population that has religious affiliations, threatened by this fact.
Yes,
and they have a pushback, and this is what, for example, politicians can build on, and they can build their strategies on, because if that kind of message, that kind of religious message that makes the religious part of society feel better for just hearing about it, that will provide them with enough support to win elections. And if we look through the whole world, but my focus is usually mostly Europe, it's very alarming what's happening there. In that regard.
Because it happens in the United States, and I've seen it happen over and over again, following politics going on over there. You hear similar, right? In the Caribbean, similar.
There is one country though in Europe. I still consider the UK Europe.
Oh, UK.
Hope that's okay, Ian.
Yes, I've got an Irish passport here somewhere, so yes, I still very much am part of the UK, of the EU.
European.
Okay, whereabouts do you live?
London.
Oh, Netherlands. Okay. So
London.
Oh, London. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
So and London is a very cosmopolitan place as well. So
it is. Yes.
But so I think one exception from that point of view in Europe is probably the UK, because the Tories, the madness that's going on currently, doesn't have a very religious aspect. It's just batshit crazy.
Well, let's count Brexit as a religion, which I think in some respects you probably could, because it's more about faith in the idea than it is in the rational scientific investigation of a concept. It genuinely has so many parallels with a cult at this point.
And that's like North Korea. For North Korea, they will say it's atheist, but it's not. It's really their whole as their thing cult. They're almost a cult. Their cult leader is the supreme leader or whatever. So it is not necessarily they might see him as this all-powerful demigod. So
yeah. I mean, there are obvious similarities between religion and ideology, but particularly in the case of Brexit, I mean, Occasionally, I speak to people from the UK about Brexit, including a few Brexiteers. They seem to have lost all reason.
Mm-hmm. There has never been
find
one. There has never been one.
No, well, apart from, and I say this one with a hint of knowing that I'm going to get it in the neck for this, but the real winner of Brexit was racism.
Yes.
You know, there's a very famous commentator on the subject. So James O'Brien, for those who know him, who is famous as saying, not everyone who voted for Brexit was a racist, but every racist voted for Brexit. And it's that really we mean in terms of the overall, the win of Brexit was for them. It wasn't for anything else in society. No one else can look at a benefit and go, yeah, we definitely achieved X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But
what I was referring to is that racism was the driving force behind it. So pure racism and xenophobia instead of any kind of religious drive. So it was not necessarily a topic when it was discussed that the religious side of society is being under attack. It's just that we are being overrun by foreigners, and it probably had a lot to do with the fact that there are not too great religious differences between UK society and the rest of Europe. But in the rest of Europe, there is a lot of talk about a religious overtaking of the culture of Europe. And I come from a country. I come from Hungary, so I live in Hungary. So I experience this firsthand from our government. The part of their rhetoric is that we are being overtaken by Islam, and that they are pushing for Christian values, and they communicate those towards their support base, that it's what we need to try to defend our Christian values, which we build our whole culture on. And it's just basically a lie. Even in Hungary, I think it was a 2018 survey that was done, and even in Hungary, young people under 29, 70% of young people had no religion whatsoever. So this is why there is a massive divide between the elder and the younger part of our society, because the elderly people tend to vote Fidesz, which is the governing party led by Viktor Orban. Some of you might have heard of him. And he's when the political changes after the end of the communist era took place, he was non-religious, or his communication, his politics were that of a non-religious kind of political force. But then he realized that with that kind of attitude, you cannot win elections. So you have to talk to the religious base. And that's when, in 1993, a great change, he started running towards the opposite direction, politically speaking. And it's been going on ever since. So it's difficult.
Anytime you can motivate people into a sort of an us versus them type of mentality, you win votes, unfortunately. And that means that politicians are incentivized to find those points of disagreement and really ratchet them, make them work for them.
I mean, you may have heard of the Dutch politician Geert Wilders. He's running a party on an anti-immigration and particularly anti-Islam ticket, and quite successfully. His party is the second largest in parliament. No other parties want to be in a coalition with his, but he won many votes in an electorate that would in the past have voted Labour.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, religion had nothing to do with it. He's just pushing the Islam is going to take over buttons, and it works. Consistently takes something like 10% of the vote. Has been for years now. I mean, he's now being attacked by an even further right party, Thierry Baudin, Forum for Democracy. They're Nazis, by the way. I have no better word for that. But yes, weirdly enough, with religion has lost most of its meaning in the Netherlands. Less than half of the population are religious. In that respect, secularism has won. But
that mobilizes the religious base.
Yes, and the weird thing is, I mean, something like 5% of the Dutch population identifies as Muslim. Has been for decades. It's not growing, despite immigration. I mean, there's also a steady stream of Muslims leaving that religion. Nobody talks about that. Of course, for Muslims, it's dangerous to say out loud that they left Islam. I know about people who got death threats because they openly, left Islam. It's terrible. You don't want to be an ex-Muslim atheist, essentially. So you don't hear much about that, but there's a steady stream of that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask how all of that affects the atheists in those countries and the humanists.
Yes. Well, I mean, in general, I mean, the net result is that we've been having right or right-center governments for something like 12 years now. And of course, in general, the political left has lost the plot a bit, which is also a big thing. I mean, they cannot seem to unite in a progressive front or something like that. And sorry, I lost the plot as well. No, I mean, it's weird that essentially an anti-Islam party can throw the whole country, the whole political system in turmoil.
Oh,
I see.
Yeah. Wow.
Do you guys see? Sorry.
Go ahead, Andras.
Do you guys see a difference, a real difference between politically what Christian communities and Islamic communities mean in a certain country? I mean, the fundamentalists are fundamentalists, and when we look through all the terrorist attacks, for example, it's not absolutely clear that it's all is coming from people affiliated to Islam, because there are lots of incidences when it's those atrocities are committed by Christian people who cannot bear the sight of Muslims in these countries. And having been to several Muslim countries myself, I can say that it's very so bigotry is big, but Islam itself is not at all more aggressive than Christianity. I mean, it has nothing to do with that kind of physical aggression. Muslim people are among the calmest and more peace-loving people, most peace-loving people that you can come across. It's just they need their religion. They are driven by their religion, and their everyday actions are being governed by it. But it's the same with people with Christian belief, right? So I don't see that. What I see as a threat to political normalcy, if there is such a thing, because I'm not even sure there is. But what I see as the greatest threat is religious bigotry. So that should be somehow avoided. And this is why I do strongly believe that secularism is the way to go. Let people practice their religion, but governments and how political parties gain their support should not be governed by that, because it's not.
Right.
It's your own thing. It's can I say things like that here on the show, that religions are like assholes? So
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone has one, but nobody else necessarily cares. So you don't need to just put it in people's face.
You see, the problem is that based on, I can tell you that, especially the more fundamentalist evangelical type Christianity, but maybe Christianity on a whole, the book teaches that you go into the whole world and make disciples, etc. And some of them extend this thing about righteousness exalted for nation, but sin is reproach among men. And they force their beliefs on others through trying to keep bigoted laws in place, like here. There's some bigoted laws still on the law books, even though there's some people who don't care about it. But a good set of evangelicals, when you talk about removing laws off the law books, they go and protest. And even you see in the United States, abortion issues, some of them want to impose that on prevent abortion, put active abortion laws in, which has happened in SCOTUS. And here, I know people have protests. Then we said you need to remove LGBTQ off the law books. You need to remove God, because we have become republic last year.
Yeah.
God from off the Constitution.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah. To remove it from out of our new Constitution, remove it. Christians keep noise, right? And they want to impose. They want, because of having been a Christian before, especially a fundamentalist Christian, I can see out of the scriptures, which I have been praying back then, that the thing is, righteousness exalted for nations, sins reproach. So they use that to say they have to make a difference because they believe their religion, their God is true, their Holy Spirit, and so on, to make a difference and prevent these things from changing, or to push new laws that based on their beliefs, on their religion, on everybody. So for them, it's not let us live together peacefully is, oh, I gotta impose this because this is what my Bible tell me, and so on. And it is really sad because I keep saying, they use this similar to what United States says. Some of the Christians in the United States says, oh, this is a Christian country. That's the same thing they say here too. I don't know if that's the same over there in Europe, especially the European countries that are still religious, to claim that, oh, we are a Christian country, or we are.
Some parties like to push it, but it's not a part of our national identity, being religious or any particular religion.
Some of the countries are very, very religious, but that's really part of their identity, as Hein says. Lithuania and Poland, for example, in Europe, those are the most devoted to Christianity. But that has historical reasons as well. For they have historical reasons for that. And you can follow their history, and it's very strongly connected to their religion. And that basically gave them the strength to live through the ages where they were oppressed, and they were run over by other countries. And that, so it makes it more understandable that religion is much more important for them.
Yeah.
But there are other countries where it's not necessarily the case, but where political parties, as you said, Hein, they push for it. They try to build their own support base on religious affiliations.
Yeah, I mean, we have a few parties that have the word Christian in their name, so of course they try to appeal to the Christian electorate. But they also try to push more general ideology of Christianity being part of Dutch society, which is definitely not the case. I mean, Dutch society, if anything, has for centuries now been tolerant of religious diversity. We have a bit of a reputation for that, as a matter of fact. I mean, when Jews were not welcome anywhere in Europe, they were welcome in the Republic. Things have changed, of course they have, but in general, religion is private life for many people today, even important. But the general idea is when you leave the door, you leave religion behind, which I think is a sensible way to look at it.
Yeah,
it's very weird here in the UK, and the way that I want to sort of start it is by saying that I would say the majority of people that I interact with on a daily basis are probably what I would count as atheists, as in they don't really have any strong beliefs. They don't think of a higher power. They don't regularly attend any form of worship or anything like that. But they, in many cases, identify as culturally Christian. We have an official state religion, the Anglican Church. We have an official representation of that church in the House of Lords. So in our governing body, the head of state is officially the head of the church. Their titles include Defender of the Faith. We have almost, it's like the higher you go up in society, the more overtly religious things get. But for the most part, in our day-to-day lives, very little actually sort of religious overtone anywhere, and it doesn't really impact our way of living at all. So it's a very, very strange, as I say, a very strange combination that we genuinely do seem to have this very secular society, but the higher you go up in the political world, the more religion you encounter.
Yeah, I would think that. I mean, I have no idea how those higher ups in society, in English one, in British society, are actually religious, or if it's just part of, how do you say that, the fabric of political life.
That's probably got a huge amount to do with it. Is that people act religious because that's seen in their eyes as the proper thing to do, and therefore they think they have to do it in order to be seen as the right person to vote for, which is a weird way of viewing things. But I guess it might be right. It might be the actual reality. I wouldn't say it's right, but yeah, it might be correct.
Mm-hmm. So, guys, any last words? Few words, because we're coming up to the 1 hour mark. Any last thoughts? Final thoughts? Or is there any questions in the chat before we? I'm not seeing any questions. So, guys, yeah, any final thoughts?
Well, there's just a little bit of interesting news bit in the Netherlands. For today, there was a large demonstration, or at least a demonstration, planned of our very right-wing people, let's say conspiracy theory lots, and they had invited David Icke of the UK as a speaker. And in a rare case of decisiveness of the Dutch government, Icke was refused entry. And so the demonstration was cancelled. Yay!
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Nice.
Well, definitely, yeah. Go for criticism, but try not to offend people, because we don't want wars. We want peace, but we want some kind of normal running of business, and that means that running countries, keeping in mind that it's more than our culture, our needs, our everyday requirements are much more than our religious needs and our religious feelings and our religious affiliations. So I think we need to be able to have conversations with the religious part of our communities.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And I think if we can get, because there are some religious persons who do go for separation of church and state, and if we can get them on board so that the other religious persons can see that it's not just the atheists or humanists or secularists that's calling.
It serves them as well.
It serves them as well. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
So I think, as my final thought, what I'd like to say is that there's a really weird anachronism. The debating chamber of the House of Commons in the UK has a limited number of seats. The way that members of Parliament can effectively reserve their seat in that chamber is by leaving a prayer card on their seat. In order to do that, they have to turn up for the opening prayers, which are Christian in nature, and they have to be present physically for that ceremony. And that, to me, has always struck me as something that is just bizarre, as I say, bizarrely anachronistic. It has no real sensible place at all in a modern secular government, but it's seen as the way that things are done and the norm, and that's very difficult to overcome.
There's one question.
I mean, there's a part to that. That's how we people work. We've done it like this for ages, so it's the right thing. It needs no further justification. And tradition is. I mean, I'm not particularly fond of tradition, but it's part of our life.
In many cases, though, custom is stronger than law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question for in chat.
Yeah, the bit about is philosophy more popular in Europe than America? I have no idea.
Probably more people understand basic philosophy, but
that may be the case.
That's just a guess. That's just a guess. Probably because most European countries include some kind of philosophical studies as well. So my guess would be yes, but I cannot substantiate it with any kind of evidence. Which is not a very skeptical thing to say.
The only thing that I'll add to that, I will agree that I don't know, because I don't know how popular philosophy is in either the US or or Europe. But what I will say is that a common joke over here is that the scientist asks the question, how does this work? The engineer asks the question, how do I apply this to make something? The artist asks the question, how on earth do I represent this? How do I draw this? And the philosopher asks the question, would you like fries with that? that's a fairly common joke over here, which disparages philosophy unnecessarily, in my view. But it kind of indicates almost the pecking order of where we see things in terms of worthwhile study, which I think is awful, but it is funny.
I remember an anecdote by Stephen Fry. He said that, and I only learned from him, and then I read it somewhere else as well, that, for example, with Harry Potter, the original title was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But that word didn't resonate well with the American audience. So for the American edition, they had to add the title of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because that had more of a that resonated better with the American society.
Which is odd, because the Philosopher's Stone is genuinely an actual sort of legend within our sort of culture.
It's alchemical.
The Sorcerer's Stone most definitely isn't.
Guys, I want to thank our patrons. The Bible says what? Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Deborah Grace, Sunny Shell, Ron, Coalson, and Phil Calderone. Thanks very much, patrons, for supporting the channel. We can't do it without you. Thank you.